Reality is sure starting to set in after the Flames had a horrendous weekend on the East Coast.
You're Locked On Flames, your daily podcast on the Calgary Flames. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Locked On Flames. As always, I'm your host, Jess Belmosto, and I'm joined by my partner in crime, Nick Zararis. Nick, how are you doing today?
It's 5:30 and the sun is still out.
We'll take it. If the Flames aren't going to win, we'll take these wins. But today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off of your first purchase. We are going to talk about the weekend and how, the Flames were living in delusion land, and now they've been brought back to reality by very good teams. And we're going to talk about Craig Conroy's transparency and just how he's playing this out, and a little math lesson brought to you by Nick, because I can't do math. But make sure you're subscribed to Locked On Flames wherever you get your podcasts, and of course on YouTube as well. We are here for you Monday through Friday, 5 days a week, your team every day. Yeah. Can we pretend those games didn't happen?
There's no better dose of reality than seeing what good actually looks like. You think you're pretty confident, you feel pretty good about yourself, you're in decent form as of late, and then you go down to Florida and you play arguably the best team in the entire league. You go to Carolina and you play one of the best teams in the East, and if you're an analytics head, one of your dark horses to win the Stanley Cup, and they look dead on Sunday against Carolina. I mean, that's probably the worst game they've played all season. I want to say they had 3 shots on goal through the first period going into the second period. And Carolina's a buzzsaw. When Carolina is right, when they are playing their game, you just don't get the puck back from them. They will spend a minute and a half at a time in your zone. And even if they don't generate a great look, you still got to play defense for 90 seconds, which is either going to tire you out and make you more susceptible to a mistake or taking a penalty. And when Carolina's right, they're going to rip you apart. And they do that to good teams too, let alone teams like the Flames, who if you're going to beat a Florida or you're going to beat a Carolina, you're going to need to play pretty close to perfect.
Yeah, and the Flames did the exact opposite of that. There were a lot of mistakes, I would say, in the games against the Panthers and the Hurricanes. Wow, I cannot talk. But it was just very different from the hockey that we had seen up to this point. Chris Tanev and Noah Hanifin may have actually, been beneficial.
Absolutely. You can play above your weight for a while. That happens. Upsets happen. Lower seeded teams or lower quality teams. Underdogs win. That's part of the sport. But when you go under the hood and you look at a lot of what was driving the Flames' success, it was positive regression stuff. It wasn't that they were playing that much better than they had earlier in the season, other than the power play, which I will say was a really driving force on that 7-3 stretch during the month of February. That bouncing from 11 to 15%, that was a discernible difference and something to point out. But that's only 15% of the game, 10% of the game. A good 80% is played at 5-on-5, and you can play above your weight at 5-on-5 for a while, especially with goaltending like the Flames have for long stretches of this season. But when you have a very small margin for error or a path to victory, there are only so many things you can do. And it's not a knock on the Flames to say, they got beat by better teams. It happens. When you play more talented teams and you make mistakes, they are going to beat you up, and it's going to feel terrible. It's genuinely going to feel like you're a lifeless group, which is what they were on Sunday. I don't blame them for playing terribly against Carolina. They had just had their pants pulled down by Florida. So one more game, I understand being a little demoralized.
And I don't expect anyone to go out there on the second half of a back-to-back to go out and look perfect and to look like a well-rested team or anything like that. You are human beings as on top of professional athletes, but like you're going to be tired. There were clearly issues with travel as well. I don't know if that impacted the team to the same extent or to a similar extent as the Sportsnet broadcast, but like there were hiccups along the way on the ice as well as off the ice, and I am upset by how big of the lack of offense, I would say, from the Flames. But like, I didn't expect them to win, but didn't expect them to lose like this.
Yeah, no, you never want to see your team get smoked. It's a reality. You play 82 games. You think about what a standard distribution look like, where it peaks in the middle at the top and then it slowly dissipates in both directions. There are going to be games the Flames win 6-0, and there are going to be games that the Flames win 6-0. So when you, in a long range of outcomes over the course of a long season, you are going to have games like that. The difference between good and bad teams in this league is your ability to be consistent. Do I know what I'm going to get from you on any given night? And there are bad teams who have good players who can occasionally play pretty well. But the difference between those types of teams and the teams like Florida, like Carolina, is that they are consistently above average to great. And that's the difference. The Flames are not awful. They are not as bad as they played in either of those games, but that's an extreme range of outcome.
Absolutely. And it's just, I think it stings more because it is right after the trade deadline and the guys that left wanted to go somewhere where they could win. And it's kind of like, oh, maybe this is, what we are. Maybe not to this degree of stinking, but like, we can't hang with the big dogs.
No, you can hang with the big dogs for so long, but part of what makes the big dogs is they've got the guys. I recorded something earlier in the day and we were talking about the Rangers in the context of, the Rangers group is pretty good, but you're going to have to be great if you want to win something. And it's not a knock on Rasmus Anderson or Mackenzie Weegar or Jonathan Huberdeau or Nazem Kadri, but Barkov and Tkachuk they're two of the 20, 25 best players in the entire world. There's only so much you can do when the other team has more guys. When the other team has more guys, you got to go above. And it's really hard to consistently dig and find that extra effort when you don't have the facilities for it.
Yeah, and hopefully, I do think that in some time, they will have some sort of better quality players that could potentially go toe-to-toe with whoever is in that top position, but I don't think that's going to be for quite some time. But do you have anything else before we move on to Craig Conroy's vulnerability?
The last thought, when you're a team like the Flames that's really reliant on one or two people to do a lot of work to make up for the rest of the roster, that's where you're going to get into extreme inconsistency, where if you're relying on just your shooting talent or your goaltending to win you games, your goaltending is going to go cold eventually. That's just the reality of a long season. Same thing with a lot of their success in the last month being on the power play. When that dries up, and you are a lot more dependent on 1, 2, 3, 4 plays swinging the outcome of a game, your margin for error is a lot smaller. And if you don't have the guys to swing those 2 or 3 plays in your direction, it's really hard to win in this league. That's why the teams with the best players consistently win.
Yes. And coming up next, we will be talking about Craig Conroy. I don't want to say clearing the air about his trade deadline plan, but he let us in on his little secrets. But before we talk about that, we are going to take a quick break and talk to you all about the app that you must use if you are looking to go to any sports, comedy, theater, or music events near you. You shouldn't have to worry when you buy tickets to your next big event. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Nick, are you hitting up any baseball games with the season right around the corner?
It's very funny you mentioned this. I have bought tickets to both Yankees and Mets opening day in the last week.
Well, look at that. Yeah. If you want to go to more games, you can use Gametime. See the view from your seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thanks everyone for sticking around and hanging out with us today on Locked On Flames. Make sure you're following us on Twitter at Jess Belmosto and at Nick Zararis. One thing that I think a lot of us crave in not just hockey, but sports media in general is transparency and vulnerability in some sense. And Craig Conroy delivered, I would say.
See, I agree with you. Fundamentally, in principle, I want to have an understanding of what my team is thinking. The counterpoint to that is I don't need to know everything. You know, there's the joke. I forget if it was family. I think it was a Family Guy joke where Peter was playing poker and he was holding his hand out and it was looking at the rest of the table. That's what you don't want to do. You don't want to let everybody else know what you're doing. And I won't say that's exactly what happened in regards to Conroy and some of the decisions over the last, 10 months, but I do think there's a limit in what you should be disclosing to everybody versus what you're keeping in house and you're telling other general managers, because it's not that I don't think it comes across like he's a little bit naive and like he's trying to explain his rationale for a lot of these decisions, which is good. But he's not doing it in a way that helps his case. You know, you want to plead your case. That's great. I agree. You should be willing to do that. But we circle back to that clip about talking with the Stars trade for Tanev. We circle back to the comments over the weekend about Markstrom. There is a limit to where being transparent can start to actively hurt your decision making.
Yeah. And I think that there's a reason why we don't always get those, big interviews or anything like that from general managers, because they don't want to tell us. They don't want everyone else to know their plan or their thought process or how they're operating. Do I think it's funny that the Flyers are just airing out their dirty laundry? Yes, but is it the way that they should be operating? No, you should not operate out of spite like that. That's how players don't want to sign with your organization. But like the Flames just have had this issue, I feel like, of this lack of direction. And now they have a general manager that he's telling everyone where he's going and how to get there. And I don't think that that's a good decision.
I think the big issue for the Flames is they really want credibility. They want to be taken seriously by other teams. They want to be taken seriously by the hockey brain trust at large. They really feel that's not unique to the Flames. It's just certain teams prioritize that more than others. There are a lot of organizations where you don't hear a peep about what they're planning to do up till the deadline. I think there's a real argument that Conroy hamstrung himself the minute he took the job and said, I'm not going to let guys walk for nothing in free agency at the end of the season. It's implied, but you shouldn't come out and say that. You can say, well, we talked to Jacob, we asked him about this, we tried to facilitate a trade and it didn't come together, or we really wanted this prospect and I kept nagging and then Dallas eventually acquiesced. There's a limit to where revealing what you think is beneficial. And I understand he really wants to build his credibility up with the fan base, and he wants people to believe in his plan. This is a multi-year thing. We've talked about it a lot over the last few weeks, that they're taking their medicine. They're probably taking their medicine a year later than they probably should have, but they're finally going to start paying. They're going to start paying the price for the decisions they've made over the last couple of years. But at the same time, don't make your job more difficult than it needs to be by trying to be nice.
Yeah. There's definitely an element to this where maybe he needs to go back to media training 101, sit down with a nice PR person and say, hey,
see, I don't even think it's nice? That, though. I genuinely think he's trying to be a nice guy, and those walls that should be up aren't, because he wants people to believe in him. And he feels that by being honest and letting people into his decision-making and his thought process, he buys more credibility with them by being honest. We talk about a lot, as long as you're honest with the fan base and you give them a sense of the direction, they're going to be more inclined to trust you. And that's ultimately why I think he's operated the way he has.
And certainly go ahead and be honest, but maybe selective honesty works a little better, where I don't need to know why this prospect didn't get traded. I don't need to know. It's nice, I'm glad you tried, but clearly it wasn't enough. So let's maybe, now that you have a year of experience under your belt moving forward, you'd kind of zip your lips.
Exactly. There's a learning curve. We've talked a lot about the idea of, if you're the new guy, you got to make some decisions you probably don't want to make because A, you're cleaning up someone else's mess, and you got to build credibility with the people above you in the hierarchy of your organization. We all made fun of Brad Treliving for signing Ryan Reeves very clearly to placate the people above him at Maple Leafs. I forget what the acronym for their business company is, but whoever the corporation that owns the Leafs, he had to make that signing to appease them, because in their minds, they lost to the Panthers because they got beat up, not because they weren't as talented. You have to make decisions to placate your stakeholders, the people who determine if you keep your job. I think some of that has come into this decision making, but specifically as far as these trades and the returns, I really do believe this is just Conroy wanting the fan base to believe in him.
And he definitely came into this with the right mentality, I would say. Obviously you need to clean up this mess that's been left, that you've watched unfold over the last decade, and now it's up to you to get out the mop and start cleaning. But I feel like him and Huska should have a nice conversation, because Huska talks and articulates things in a very honest way, but in a way where it's not oversharing, I guess. It's not too much information that it's what we need to know.
Yes, exactly. I'm not going to kill the guy for this, because genuinely, he's new at this. He's kind of finding his lane for how he wants to operate. But there's a reason the GMs aren't on the sports talk shows giving insight into their decision making. You have one or two people you trust that you confide in that disperse your messaging. And I'll give a good example of this, and then we can get out of this segment. The Rangers made their decisions, Roslovic, Wenberg, and Chad Ruhwedel last week. Within an hour of the Roslovic trade, the narrative was out. I hate to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but when 5 different people from 5 different publications all use the exact same verbiage, that tells me you got a message out. The message in this case was, Chris Drury didn't like the prices. He thought things were too expensive. He bought small. 2 years ago, and they went to the conference final. They got the message out. He didn't have to put his name to it, but it very clearly came from the organization. That's kind of the middle ground here. We as Flames fans, we got to understand where Conroy's trusted sources are, who's going to have a better insight into how he operates. But I think that'll come with time.
It's only been, like you said, 10 months. I'm not going to be calling for this guy's job. I mean, it's been a somewhat better season than I think a lot of us expected, and he crossed off the number one item on his to-do list. So I'll give him that. But coming up next, we are going to talk about the math and everything you need to know leading up to these final 18 games of the season. But before we do that, we're going to talk about some numbers, but these are numbers that you might actually like, and that would be FanDuel. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a one seed, it's time to go dancing on America's number one sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on your point spreads, money lines, you name it. You can even pick who's going to win it all. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. Nick, do you have a favorite college basketball team?
My college basketball experience usually starts when the conference tournaments start, which is this week and next week, so I have an idea. But generally speaking, no, there's no logic to this. I pick a team that's fun to watch and go from there.
Pick the team with the best uniform and have fun with it. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in to today's episode of Locked On Flames. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you get your podcasts and, of course, on YouTube as well. I sat on my phone and counted how many games they had left after the third or fourth goal on Sunday, and I said, "Oh, this is a mess." What can you tell us?
They're taking their medicine. They are taking their medicine. It is more likely than not going to be more of that than what February was. You know, the sugar high, the nobody believes in us, that stuff is useful. Don't get me wrong. It's a powerful tool in a coach's toolbox to do even the GM doesn't believe in you. What are you prepared to do about it? But you can only do so much when you're not that talented of a team. And again, that's the point. The Flames traded away several good players over the last month and a half because they know even with those guys, they weren't going to make a huge run. So they are making a calculated decision. And for the sake of math, they have 67 points through 64 games. If they played at their current pace for the final 82, they would finish with 86 points. That would be about 5 worse than last year, and that would be 10 off the pace of the last wild card. That is not awful. That is firmly mediocre to be about 10 points back of that last wild card spot. But you have to account for the fact that in the last month, and I got to pull it up here because I did a bad job writing my notes, Vegas is 3-6-1 in their last 10, and they're still on pace for 96 standings points. You're going to assume that a team that added Noah Hannafin, that added Anthony Mantha, and may or may not add Tomas Hertl before the playoffs start, is going to turn around a 3-7-10 into something a little bit better. The math is really straightforward. The Flames have, I think it's 18. Yeah, they have 18 games remaining. If they wanted to get to that 96 point threshold, they would need to win something in the neighborhood of 13 of their final 18, 14 of their final 18, if they wanted to make up the gap between them and Las Vegas. And that's not impossible. It is extremely unlikely. That is part of the reason the Flames did not totally delude themselves into thinking, maybe we should keep these guys and try and push for a playoff spot.
Which is fantastic. I'm so glad that there has been a true shift in mentality, because I don't know if that would have been the case had someone else been in charge. But we saw New Jersey, for example, how they needed to win a certain number of games, I think over the month of February, to still hang in the contender spot for the playoffs. And they crapped themselves, and now they're so far out of it that they traded off their top scorer at the deadline.
The Devils also had one more thing working for them that the Flames didn't. The East is not that good. The Devils have had every opportunity to get back in the mix over the last couple of months. And instead, the Islanders did it.
No one's
Like, I just full stop. The Islanders have won 6 in a row, and they've taken care of business against bad teams. And they don't have, any great wins in their last months. The Islanders, they've beaten the Sharks, the Blues. The Bruins are a decent win, but the Bruins are also having a pretty rough month to begin with as well. They had to come back from 3 down against the Blues. They're not amazing, but they are the best of the mediocre teams. And in the East, that's enough. The Flames do not have that luxury. Nashville rattling off like 8 out of 10, that kind of came out of nowhere. But you look at the 6 teams in divisional spots right now. Winnipeg, Dallas, Colorado. The Flames are not better than any of those teams. You look in the Pacific, Edmonton, Vegas, Vancouver. Flames are not better than any of those teams. There's also LA, who slowly but surely kind of getting back into the mix. The Flames are not better than them. The math is not great for the Flames if they were to try and make this happen. Not to sound like Elliot Friedman on 32 Thoughts, but I don't like the Flames math.
No, and there's a reason why we talk about this. And it's, it's great to have like that team playoff mentality that, they could really pull this one out. I don't think that that's the case. And I hate, being the bearer of bad news on such a gorgeous Monday afternoon, but like realistically, what does this team bring to the table against any of these wild card spots? Like nothing. They
got the goalie.
That's it.
That's it. They've got the goalie. That's really all that's keeping the Flames afloat. I mean, I know this is a dumb argument because a lot of people make this where it's like if you take away a team's best player, of course the team's going to be bad. That's part of why they're the best player on the team. But for the purposes of that exercise, if you gave the Flames league average goaltending, they'd be bottom 6, 7 in the entire league. There'd be real conversation about them being in the mix for Macklin Calabrini. That's how bad they would be. And that's a testament to how good Markstrom has been this year. But they got to play these games. They got 18 games to go. This is where it's supposed to be not no consequences, but low consequences. And we figure out what happens. There are a lot of guys who are going to cycle through in the next few weeks just to get a look. And as a fan, that is direct action. You are not seeing Trevor Lewis and Milan Lucic. You are seeing young guys who need this opportunity. And that's why these games matter. This is all about opportunity. And as you and I have hammered, this is your ramp up for next season. These final 18 games, treat them like your preseason for next year.
I mean, we talk about it all the time, how this team has had so many like extended preseasons because of like this little there's no risk, there's nothing, you have this free trial time at the end of the season. And I want to see Dustin Wolf up here. I don't understand, and sure, they're getting him ready for the AHL playoffs, I understand that, but like, can we just try again, give him a little bit of confidence heading into next season, assuming Dan Vladar walks on July 1st?
It's frustrating because that's the ideal outcome for the future of the team. That you ease Wolf in, you get him, there's 18 left. Ideal world, 7-8 starts, not half, but close to it, because he needs the reps. And I don't want to say this, the AHL affiliate doesn't matter. I hate to be that guy. I hate to dampen the mood about something the Flames are generally pretty good about, the Stampeders. But let's be honest here and take it with a grain of salt. They're not this. They are not this. They are not infallible. It's good that the AHL affiliate is competitive, but it doesn't ultimately matter for the long-term health of the team.
Yeah. I mean, Dustin Wolf, we've seen it with so many players. Their talent at the AHL level doesn't always translate the same way at the NHL level.
Oh, I'm a dumbass. Don't mind me. I called the Wranglers the Stampeders.
I mean, there is a Stampede in Calgary, so I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. No. The Stampeders are the football team. My brain is tired. Excuse me.
I think we can forgive you because you're coming off of a very long week of trade deadline coverage for not only the Flames and the Rangers, but pretty much the whole league on top of your other fun, creative content outlets. But do we have any final words before we wrap up today's reality check?
It's probably going to get worse before it gets better.
So make sure you're subscribed to Locked On Flames wherever you get your podcasts so you can, misery loves company. So come hang out with us and we will see you tomorrow. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube and we'll be back.